Mr. Chair, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We're going to get started now. Understand the state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, city council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at the public hearing of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Enquirer, Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. Christmas, will you please call the roll to take attendance? The members in attendance to indicate by saying present or aye. And I do believe that if you say a couple of words, your screen will be displayed. Mr. Christmas, please call the roll.
Council President Clark.
Aye.
Council Lady Bass.
Good afternoon. I am present. Thank you very much.
Council Lady Brooks.
Good afternoon. I am present.
Councilman Dom.
Good afternoon, Council President and colleagues.
Council Lady Godier.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, colleagues. Present.
Council Lady Gilmore Richardson. Councilman Green.
Good afternoon, members of council, the public. I am present.
Council Lady Gim.
Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm present.
Councilman Heenan.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I am present.
Councilman Johnson.
Present.
Councilman Jones.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, colleagues. The work continues.
Councilman O'Neill.
Present.
Councilman O.
Present. Good afternoon, everybody.
Council Lady Parker.
Present. Afternoon, Mr. President and colleagues.
Council Lady Quinones Sanchez.
Good afternoon, members and colleagues.
Councilman Squilla.
Good afternoon, Council President and colleagues. Present.
Councilman Thomas.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, colleagues.
Council Lady Gilmore Richardson, please. That's who we have, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. And thank you all. Thank you very much. We have established a quorum of the committee, and we will move forward. This is the public hearing of the committee of the whole regarding bills number 200-369 and 200-419. Mr. Christmas, will you please read the titles of the bills?
Bill 200-369, authorizing city officials to file Articles of Incorporation to establish a nonprofit corporation that shall be called the Philadelphia Poverty Action Fund for the purpose of reducing poverty in Philadelphia. And Bill number 200-419, authorizing transfers and appropriations for fiscal year 2021 from the general fund, the council, to the general fund, the director of finance.
Thank you. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this is a public hearing, is being recorded, and because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectations of privacy. By continuing to be in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that they will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this particular person. Before we start, just briefly, to the members, most of you were here last year. As you all can recall, we established this process of dealing with this whole issue centering around poverty. We were moving along relatively swiftly, established all of the things associated with moving the agenda, stood on the stage. We talked about taking us below 20%. We were really excited and happy about the prospect of getting a handle on this long-standing issue. And unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and we were stopped in our tracks. The simple reality is that poverty didn't stop in its tracks. As a matter of fact, poverty expanded. So now more than ever, there's the need to deal with this in a very aggressive and meaningful way. So I want to thank all the colleagues for supporting the new normal budget act, where we were able to put in place $25 million to deal with issues like poverty and some of the other challenges that have been made public, because all of us have known the disparities that have existed for a long time as it relates to people of color. So thank you for your support. But now it's time to implement this, and hopefully with this passage of this legislation, we'll be in a position to move as expeditiously as possible to make sure that we start touching people's lives in a very positive way as it relates to our ability to raise the necessary and increase the quality of life for every citizen of the city of Philadelphia. Not only those that are in or at the poverty level, but we believe that if all Philadelphians, if those Philadelphians prosper, all Philadelphians will prosper. So thank you.
Council President,
Yes, sir.
we've been joined by Council Lady Gilmore Richardson.
Council Lady, how are you?
Good afternoon, Council President and colleagues. My apologies. I was on the wrong link. So thank you very much.
It's okay. I seem to be on the wrong link every day of the week, Mr. Christmas, will you please call the first panel of witnesses we have to testify this afternoon?
Charmin Matlock Turner, President and CEO of the Urban Affairs Coalition. Eva Gladstein, Deputy Managing Director for Health and Human Services. And Mel Wells, President and CEO of One Day at a Time, Inc.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christmas, and good afternoon to our panel. I believe you're all connected. And can you please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony? And again, thank you all so much for participating on this initiative early on as co-chairs of the Poverty Action Plan. Thank you so much. Please proceed.
I wasn't quite sure who was to go first. I can get started. This is Charmaine.
Self-select.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, President Clark and council members, and to my co-chairs. Again, my name is Charmaine Matlock Turner. I'm the President and CEO of the Urban Affairs Coalition. I am also the former co-chair, along with Mel Wells and Eva Gladstein, of the commission, and also co-chair with Mel Wells of the Jobs and Education Subcommittee of the Special Committee on Poverty Reduction and Prevention. The 2019 report, Narrowing the Gap, Strategies to Alleviate Poverty and Prevent Poverty in Philadelphia, identified 27 strategies and recommendations to address poverty in our city. Our work, entitled the Philadelphia Poverty Action Plan, was put together by Council's Special Committee on Poverty Reduction and Prevention. It provides recommendations for how public-private partnerships can address and improve housing, jobs, education, and the social safety net for residents who are impoverished in our city. However, we now must add to our concerns the devastating impact of COVID-19 on the physical and financial health and well-being of so many of our most vulnerable citizens. I believe that it is of the utmost importance that we establish the Philadelphia Poverty Action Fund to tackle the issues that we identified in the report that we released in June, and with a real understanding of the added pain brought on by the current COVID-19 pandemic. I believe these funds will prepare us to help revive our communities and provide essential resources and support for those most in need. UAC has been a trusted partner in this work for over 50 years. The more than 80 area nonprofits and social entrepreneurs who are part of the UAC family of programs work every day to end homelessness, find paths and bridges to self-sufficiency, support quality education, help youth plan their futures, and so much more. Mel Wells, CEO of One Day at a Time, a UAC partner, is here with us today and is on the front lines every day providing housing support, testing, and most importantly, hope to thousands of Philadelphians. I have personally witnessed the impact of this pandemic, not only on our citizens, but on our community organizations that are there to provide essential services to those in need, as well as employment to so many throughout our city. Yet recently we learned that 4 UAC partner programs have lost some of their funding as a result of COVID-19. Too many of our constituents have lost their jobs, relying on food banks for food, unemployment, and housing assistance programs to survive during the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, we know that the city of Philadelphia had almost 400,000 of our 1.6 million citizens living below the poverty line. Recent reports indicate that over 40% of our residents are unemployed, and this will only further exacerbate issues with housing and the need for social safety needs as outlined in our report. And this work must be done in partnership. City Council, in developing the Philadelphia Poverty Action Plan, made sure it was an inclusive process. Representatives from the private sector, including the business community, were an important part of developing the plan. This effort to be inclusive has continued as we have tackled some of the most difficult issues facing Philadelphia over the last 7 months. City Council, the mayor, foundations, nonprofits, and community institutions took on the challenge to support communities through the Philadelphia COVID-19 Fund. I served on the fund steering committee and saw how working collaboratively helped us to raise and distribute more than $18 million to more than 500 nonprofits in our community who were helping those most in need. I also served on the steering committee of the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce's Regional Recharge and Recovery Task Force, a public-private collaboration with commitments from over 160 expert leaders from the business and civic community in partnership with local and state governments to devise, present, and implement solutions for this crisis in a unified voice. Currently, the mayor's office, under the mayor's leadership, and I know Eva is here, has created the Reform, Transformation, and Reconciliation Committee, again, made up of representatives from the private and public sectors to advise, inform, connect, and work to eliminate race-based disparities in Philadelphia communities and promote racial and social justice. These efforts demonstrate that in a time of crisis, we have learned to work effectively together to tackle big issues that are important to the future of our city. The Philadelphia Poverty Action Fund nonprofit will be an important part of this citywide and regional collaborative work. A nonprofit supported by the city of Philadelphia, including the legislative branch as well as the executive branch and the public and private sector, are critical to tackling and driving down poverty by 100,000 by the year 2024. I would hope that this legislation would pass and that members of the business community, the nonprofit sector, including foundations, community organizations, and other social sector organizations, will all work together to fund this effort and to help us reach our goals. In the end, it must be all of us working together if we are to end racism, drive down poverty, and rebuild a city that is open, safe, and fair for us all. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Next. Eva? Yeah, why don't the three of you all just go ahead with your testimony and then we can ask questions.
Sure. My name is Eva Gladstein. I'm Deputy Managing Director for Health and Human Services for the City of Philadelphia, and I want to extend my appreciation to the Council President, members of Council, and certainly my former co-chairs of the task force that was created to develop the report that we did last year. I'm really happy today to see that we are, despite COVID and many rough waters that the city has had, that we're able to move forward now in the creation of the Poverty Action Fund. And I'm pleased that it is a collaboration among private sector, philanthropy, as well as the city of Philadelphia. These are very large problems. They're very tough times that we're in, and we need all hands on deck and, more importantly, working together as one. So I appreciate this effort. I'll just state very briefly that for the last 6 months during the pandemic, the work of Health and Human Services has been very intense, and many of the issues that we were dealing with before have been exacerbated by the pandemic and have become kind of laid bare and more transparent. We have been working to support vulnerable individuals whose vulnerability has become more exposed, many of whom were housing insecure beforehand, some of whom are homeless and therefore really did not have a way to stay safely at home. Others were food insecure and needed the forms of assistance that we provided and need to continue to provide in terms of food boxes and meals, working in partnership with many wonderful nonprofit organizations. We've also collaborated with planning and development and others to develop programs to assist with rental assistance that would benefit both tenants and landlords so that we can maintain our affordable housing stock, which need to not just be maintained, but grown over time. And so I think some of our experience over the last 6 months is that there's a desperate need for a fund such as this. We need to be able to increase these resources. Short of actual cash assistance to households who have suffered from unemployment, as Charmin Matlock Turner described earlier, the small businesses on our commercial corridors that have seen a loss of business and potentially the livelihood for those families that are supporting those businesses. Again, folks' inability to pay for food or the basic necessities as well as their rent. And so to the extent to which this fund is able to be nimble and agile enough to meet those demands, which were so evident given our high poverty level before, but are so much more evident now, I think it's a critical time to get this moving. We really appreciated the work that was done and the support from the COVID-19 fund, and we saw how those targeted investments made a real difference during the spring and summer. And I'm hoping that this fund can kind of take on some of that mantle. And I think it's when we started this work in the spring, we thought it would be a week or two or a few months. It's now obvious that this is going to be a long haul. It's going to take quite a while for us to be able to restore both the security of individual households as well as our communities as a whole. And so having some infrastructure in place and institutional support such as this fund will be critical to doing that. And so again, I appreciate council's moving forward on this, and we'll be happy to help and support in any way we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gladstein. Mel? Mr. Wells?
All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon, council. Thank you again for this opportunity. I'll just thank you for the co-chairs, and, I appreciate working with my co-chairs every day. But I appreciate you doing this for the community, those who are stuck in poverty, those who are dealing with violence. We know a lot of this stuff actually comes from just poverty, is born out of poverty when you're dealing with loss of jobs, dealing with the violence. So we thank you for that. At one day at a time, we service over 56,000 people a year in the community all around the city of Philadelphia. One of the biggest things we've seen due to COVID is that our numbers have actually jumped astronomically. So we're at 70,000 people so far that we have served this year. Due to COVID, due to people losing their jobs. And one of the things that really hurts my heart that I am seeing due to a lot of loss of jobs, the violence rates are going up. You also seeing that a lot of people actually more drug and alcohol use is going on. Not only by people in our community, but people who just, around the Philadelphia area who lose their jobs and wind up being in Philadelphia because they have lost their jobs. They're dealing with a lot of nightmares in their family. So I just wanted to thank everybody. I echo everything that my co-chair said, especially Ms. Charmaine. And one day at a time, we always stand ready to serve. And I really, really appreciate y'all talking about starting the COVID, the nonprofit for dealing with poverty, because, the traditional processes really does not work for our community. A lot of people can't wait 7 or 10 days to get food in their homes or help in their home. And I say that echoing the same day pay program that we're starting because of City Council. And so I thank you so much for not forgetting about those who actually back us up day in and day out, but live in the heart of our community, but sometimes in the middle of a problem that they feel like they may not be heard. But because of you coming up with this, we thank you so much for bringing this to the city and our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Thank you, and thank you, the three of you all, so much for your work, not just on this issue, but your long-standing issues as it relates to working hard for the citizens of the city of Philadelphia in your own rights. Really appreciate it. I have a couple of quick questions, then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez, and the members for questions. During the course of the process and narrowing the gap, you all had public hearings, which I really enjoyed, having the opportunity to come and view and participate minimally to some of them. But I noticed that there were so many people engaged, and that was a good thing, participating. And so my question is, because this is going to take a while, there's no kidding ourselves, poverty is not going away in the short term, and that timeline has actually been extended. Given what's going on as it relates to COVID and some of the other challenges that we now face. Have you all talked about building in a strategy, or was that a part of the early outreach to have people engaged long-term, 6 months out, a year out, with that core group of people that participated and testified and said that they wanted to help? Do we have it, or have we thought about a structure that allows them to participate long-range? That everyday average citizen that came to Dobbins or came down to North Broad Street or all of the other locations where we had these public outreach meetings? Long question, but I think you all get it.
This is Eva. I would say that we try very hard to kind of collaborate on a daily basis through a number of different mechanisms. Some of it's geographically based, and some of it's and Mel is certainly a part of some of these. Some of it is with people who are providers for services. But I want to take your question into consideration because we had a very engaged, active committee dealing with benefits access. And benefits access continues to be a very high priority. In fact, if today's event had been somewhat different, we would have used the mayor's press conference to talk about some resources, some federal resources that are still on the table that we need to connect folks to. And so I think while we communicate informally, it's not been through continuing the previous structure, but I think that's a point well made, and we will consider how to do that. I do want to note, though, that there have been some improvements since the time of the committee, and specifically at the state level. One of our recommendations, which had to do with sealing of records, having to where there was just outstanding fines or fees, I believe, passed at least one of the houses in Harrisburg. And so we're continuing to move forward also around fines and fees, which was another set of issues that we addressed. And so work continues, but not through the formal structure we had in the past. And I think we should consider that.
Thanks.
I would really just echo what Eva said. I don't think that we've had a formal process in place. I think what was good was that we did collect information from everyone who participated and made sure that information was shared with that group. But I think that it certainly is an opportunity as this nonprofit and the fund is developed for us to have a more formal process. I do want to share that at UAC, we are looking at how to more effectively engage communities through opportunities for gathering, to share information, and also to get feedback. So I would love to be able to get back to you as we develop that process, and hope that it will be something that could help in this process as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things, Mel Wells speaking, one of the things that me and Ms. Charmin, we spoke about was at these hearings for now and moving forward, that we wanted to make sure that we heard the community voice first before they heard our voice. And then we actually talked about it, Ms. Charmin, of just trying to get a few of people from the community kind of, to get what's going on, the gist of what's going on in the community so we can better resolve it. So I echo both of Ms. Charmaine and Eva that we definitely should come up with something outside of what we're doing.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm actually going to recognize Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez, who was also a co-chair. Councilwoman, you want to lead off for council members with questions for the panel?
I'll be brief because I think the next panel will bring to full circle some of the work that we're doing. I just want to thank you, Council President. I wasn't sure I wanted to take on this task, but having spent, a year talking to 100 subject experts, people with lived experience, getting hollered at some of these meetings, as Eva and Charmaine will tell you, some of the people who came to testify were very raw and real, and we appreciated that, and really just want to amplify and thank all of the folks who participated and created really good policy documents and pilots that, as Eva said, some of the things we've been able to work on and continue to check off the boxes, and then others, we really look forward to creating the space and the table for us to pilot those. I want to thank Councilmember Alan Dom, who also participated and worked with me on this committee and who went to just about every hearing and every discussion that could be had, and I appreciate his support throughout this process. And I do want, and I really want to make sure that as we move forward, we continue that community engagement. I know it was a different time. We had $400 million surplus, but now we got to double down, right? Now it's more intentional, more focused, more deliberate. But that engagement and that public conversation has to continue, and it has to be formalized so that people know that we're being clear, transparent, and inclusive. So thank you very much, Council President, and to all the folks. And the real work begins, moving forward. What we did was really, as a collective, put together the best minds about how do we move forward. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Council Lady. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee for this first panel? Okay, don't see any. Thank you, panel. Oh, by the way, I heard somebody reference former co-chairs. I don't know if you all thought this was a short-term thing. You are not. Can't leave. You can't just simply do this. I know we're establishing the poverty fund and we'll have its membership, but I mean, you know how that is. You still got to hang. We appreciate it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you. All right.
Thank you.
There appears to be no questions of this committee. Thank you all very much. Next, Mr. Christmas, would you call the names? The next panel of witnesses.
Panel number 2, Keith Liebhardt, Chair of the Board of Directors for the Limfest Foundation. Bill Golderer, President and CEO of the United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey. And for the record, I would like to just note that Chief of Staff to the Mayor, Jim Engler, did submit written testimony in support of both bills 200-369 and 200-419.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Christmas. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Council President.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you all for all you do for the city of Philadelphia. We really appreciate you, particularly as it relates to the understanding and the commitment to work in a public-private partnership that is increasingly being more and more important as government's ability to deal with the challenges continue to dwindle. As private sector understand the need for all to flourish, and it helps everyone. I really appreciate you all agreeing to participate in this. As you heard earlier, once you get in, it's hard to get out. So I just want to forewarn you. But no, seriously, I appreciate what you all do so much. So you guys kind of self-select who wants to start their testimony first.
Dr. Liebhardt.
Well, once Bill gets you in, he won't let you out either way either. So, so first and foremost, it's an honor for me to be able to present to council today. I represent, I think, a unique perspective, having grown up a part of the working poor in our city, grew up in West Oak Lane, single parent home, every challenge that you can imagine coming up, and benefited from, just a great education and the opportunity to change my socioeconomic condition. But have never lost touch to the plight of, the people who I grew up with, and still very connected to the community from which I come from, despite now having the honor of serving as the chair of the board of the Limfest Foundation. And, years ago when Jerry asked me to first come on the board, and to then become the chair of the board of the Limfest Foundation, felt like I could have died and went to heaven, because he asked me to provide some direction around where those resources would go. And I've been very intentional as the chair of the board of making sure that those resources stayed here in Philadelphia. And we have been largely focusing on helping young people in the city of Philadelphia to make the successful transition from early childhood into middle school, into careers, or to high school, into career pathways, and then on to young adults. And I cannot say, and we all know that it has not been without its challenges. We've invested a lot of money and time and energy trying to think through these things, similar to everyone here on this Zoom, on this Teams call here now. We spent a lot of resources looking at it. And the thing that I can say is that, the execution, oftentimes when you have lots of different parties working together, there's often, different egos and challenges around keeping focus on what the objective is. And I came out of the recent process around the COVID fund, which was led by United Way and the Philadelphia Foundation, extremely impressed in the execution of that. And that was the rapid deployment of funds to lots of different organizations and to lots of different charities that in reality, us as a foundation wouldn't have had the capacity to, review every application or get those resources out the door, despite recognizing that these are really, really important issues, right? Important challenges. And so when Bill started to talk to me about this poverty fund, for me, it has always been one of the saddest things to think of the city that I grew up, that we remain the poorest big city in the country. And we know, and we've been saying this for years, and, we know that, poverty just breeds despair. It breeds hopelessness. It breeds a sense of inferiority, right? When our kids are growing up now with access to, social media channels and Instagram and all the fluff that's associated with social media, and everyone projecting a lifestyle, and when you're young and feeling like you're not able to attain or achieve a certain thing, you just reach out and you begin to just by any means necessary. And when George Floyd hit, and I was talking to a lot of my peers, and I'd say in the corporate suite, and I would often say to them, if I wasn't where I was today, I would be looting too, right? I mean, there's no question that I would be, if I didn't have anything to lose, right? When you create a permanent underclass of citizens, as we've done in Philadelphia, and I think, yes, we can talk about America, but I think Philadelphia has been unique in doing that. Philadelphia has been intentional and we talk about systemic racism, it is rooted in pretty much every institution within the city of Philadelphia. And we have to be honest with that. And Bill and I have had very direct conversations around that. I made it clear to Bill when we talked about this fund is, if we're going to talk about doing studies, we need to make sure that when we're studying the problem, we're using minority businesses to really identify the solution as well, right? We just can't study the problem and identify, majority firms to help come in and assess it. How are we including minority businesses in the process? And so, for me, this is absolutely critical. This is absolutely necessary. This is something that we have to be committed to for the long term, and it's not just the people on this call. We have to be really open and honest about the challenges that the unions present, right? As a pathway for poor and disenfranchised minorities who are unable to get on these construction sites in the city of Philadelphia, who will be unable to participate in any infrastructure projects that may come down the pike in years to come. We have to be intentional and be really, really honest that this is something in Philadelphia that we need to address. We've been a a largely Democratic-led city, and we talked about the national election here in Philadelphia, and I'm a proud Democrat, but I think we have failed our people here in Philadelphia. We have failed poor people here in Philadelphia for years, and we can no longer continue to do that. I know for a fact that as a foundation, we have come to leaders in the city, and no one on this call, thank God, but we have come to leaders in the city who are in positions of power and said to them, name your price to train people for access into the unions. The money is here. We're not going anywhere. Name your price. Nothing happened. Nada. And as I said, thankfully that, I'm not talking about anyone on this call, but you can imagine if I'm not talking to people on this call, I'm talking about somebody who is, if not as powerful, equally as powerful as the people on this call. Name your price. We will have resources there to support anyone who could help them. If we're saying that testing is the issue, if we're saying capacity is the issue, we will help with capacity, right? And so we have to be honest. We have to have these conversations and open. We have to be honest about the fact that, there is a level of systemic racism at play in the power structures in the city that won't allow Black, brown, and yellow people to lift themselves out of poverty. And I'll give you one stat that I think was quite alarming that shows why we have to be intentional, as Councilwoman Keona said, we have to be intentional about this is, when they presented out the report around household income here in the Philadelphia region, nationally, we all know, right? And it's just widely accepted nationally that in order of priority of household income, the highest earners in the country are Asian people, Asian Americans, right? Behind them, by some, small margin, white Americans. Then it's, the rest that are significantly lower than them. In Philadelphia, the Asians make less than the white people, right? Like that shows you to me that if that doesn't jump out as what is happening different here in Philadelphia, where nationally, Asians who come to this country, who typically get trained as engineers and doctors and all these other higher level degrees, on average, make more than any other race in Philadelphia. They too are behind the white people here. So we have to be really, really clear that this conversation starts here. It starts with people who are willing to be intentional about, extinguishing and decreasing poverty here in our city, but it spills out into the business community as well as to the union infrastructure that exists here. We are here at the table. We want to be funders and supporters, and we want to back it. But quite honestly, as you can see in my presentation and my candor here, this can no longer be the same approach. We can no longer just shield people from their responsibility in addressing poverty and addressing racism and addressing practices and things that hold people back. Because what happens is you get hopelessness in the street. What happens is you get looting. You get people who feel like this is their only opportunity to get something. So the slightest thing becomes a trigger, right? And we need to be very, very intentional about addressing that. So I'll shut up, and I appreciate the opportunity to present here today and speak to you today.
Thank you. Good to hear from the private sector. Different perspective, what's needed. Bill?
Council President Clark, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address this body. Councilwoman Sanchez, thank you for your leadership, and to all the members for the opportunity to contribute to this urgent conversation. Before I acknowledge Keith, I want to make sure I acknowledge the co-chairs who I think are not going to get to retire anytime soon, Mel Wells and Eva Gladstein and Charmin Matlock Turner, who have for decades demonstrated the best of who we are, a real commitment to serve our neighbor. And I'm so grateful to Keith for joining and sitting next to me virtually in this moment. We need proven and trusted leaders who call them like they see them right now. And so this is a time of, as Keith mentioned, anguish and frustration, but real hope. And the sure-footed and steady-handed leadership of this body at a critical juncture is incredibly important. And the first important step is to establish this Poverty Action Fund to overcome some impediments in our way, which are not just COVID, they're not just systemic racism, but I just need to lift this up. There is an element of cynicism that we need to overcome as to whether or not we could truly pull together in this time when we really need to, a public-private partnership that is really delivering results and putting people first. Before I get into it, I want to make sure, I know most of you on this body, but just to introduce myself, I'm Bill Golderer. I'm pleased and honored to serve the mission of Our United Way, which about 3 years ago, prior to my arrival, decided to focus on how to meaningfully and measurably reduce the suffering that comes from poverty and to increase and augment economic mobility in this region. As Council President mentioned, it is focused on our impoverished neighbors and asking whether or not they can achieve greater mobility and what we can be doing about it. But it really does benefit every aspect of our city if we are able to demonstrate that people can move over the stubborn barriers that are in front of them. And if we could do more to come alongside them, it could mean the world, and it could really change the narrative about Philadelphia. As you may know, and if you don't, poverty and the barriers to overcoming poverty are no stranger to me. Prior to serving United Way's mission, I founded an organization called Broad Street Ministry, which is not unlike the work that Mr. Wells does. We receive over 70,000 folks who are coming through that, what I like to call the widest front door in Philadelphia, who are seeking in body, mind, and spirit an opportunity to realize their hope, to claim an opportunity and a chance to claim their piece of the American dream. And when they come through that door, and Eva Gladstein was such a partner to me in this, you saw the deep level of disconnection to the vital services that people needed. And we enjoyed so much support from agile city workers, from incredibly committed private sector leaders, from philanthropy, and really deep partnership among other community organizations who are not vying for space, but we're really coming together and putting people first. And that determination, that resolve, that need that we have right now to put people first is crucial. So let me just talk briefly about the public-private partnership, and there may be questions. As my friend and dedicated United Way board member, Charmin Matlock Turner, shared, we've arrived at a crucial leadership moment in somewhat of a uniquely Philly way. And the chairs of this task force went into the streets and asked folk what they needed, and were really close to the ground in asking members of our community what it is they need to overcome their challenges. And while that work was going on, the private sector also was working on their set of initiatives about what they think we should be doing in this moment to meet what began as an economic pandemic that has now become an economic pandemic for our region. There's a bunch of initiatives that were being brought forward over there. Then there's coming alongside community organizations. That's where United Way lives, and connecting the dots there between United Way and the community, the 160 organizations that we currently fund, as well as other private sector partners and investors who want to see our communities thrive and rise to meet this moment. And what you found, which is something that unfortunately is a habit of Philly, and I'm gonna follow on what my friend Keith says, is the danger that we are in this moment is further fragmentation rather than focus. And we sometimes default to protecting programs rather than prioritizing people. And so this Poverty Action Fund imagines a bigger table where community is represented. People with lived experience of poverty and its challenges are at the head of the table, and others who bring a lot to this challenge in this moment are seated around that table with a commitment to deliver results collaboratively. Recently, we've had some success with this. As mentioned before, I was honored to co-chair the COVID Relief and Response Fund. We've been working hard on this challenge of so many of our young people to stay on their path to grade level reading. and having to do so without connection to internet. United Way is fully behind the scenes, collaboratively working to drive results during PHL Connect Ed. And what I will tell you is these collaborative efforts, which we struggle in Philadelphia to pull off for lots of reasons, which I could get into, but I won't. When we work collaboratively and we work and we put results in front of everything else, we put ourselves in a better position to meet the moment we're in now, because many of you, I don't need to tell you this, when we were here last time, the Great Recession of 2008, our city experienced the least equitable economic recovery of any major city. Of any of our peer cities, we had the least equitable recovery. And now we're back in this moment again, and we simply cannot afford to repeat that result. But as my grandmother used to say, if you want a different result, you got to take different action. So what is being proposed here by this legislation are a couple of key elements, and there are three. One, there is something that I know everybody on this call shares, and you are not alone. I've been speaking, as Keith mentioned, to leaders in private philanthropy, those in the corporate sector, and obviously the communities always ready to serve. We have to come to this task and this challenge with a real sense of urgency. And we have to prioritize the things that we know that will help our neighbors the most first. The establishment of a $10 million poverty action plan puts the onus on myself and others to raise a matching $10 million to deploy these leveraged resources that will deliver immediate and tangible impact to our neighborhoods and families right now. But we need to be swift about it. As you may know, the first community challenge that we have before us that would really alleviate some of the suffering and stabilize some of our families is the upcoming 2021 tax season. The Committee on Poverty Reduction that you all listened to all this testimony, one theme you may remember is that we leave $450 million in federal subsidies for which our neighbors are eligible. That's cash in people's pockets. We need to build a bigger and stronger infrastructure to draw those down and get that cash into the pockets of our neighbors so that greater stability can take hold in a time of upheaval. And in order to do that, which is probably the most effective poverty fighting measure we can take in this moment, we need to better capitalize and, as Keith said, execute on that vision that I know we all share, but we need to move today in order for that to happen. Second, behind that community challenge is the need to invest in employment and pathways for small businesses to support economic recovery through business stability and growth. That means creating a real pipeline for skill development for promising young people, to develop real industry partnerships with employers who are ready to hire young people and hire locally, and to reduce barriers to employment that are stubborn and continue to exist that exclude people from the workplace. And I don't need to tell you all about the importance of that. The second key element, besides a sense of urgency, as I mentioned before, that we need to recognize that we cannot do things in the same way we have always done them, but we need to insist upon collaboration, creativity, and innovation. That will mean, in establishing a public-private partnership, that basically that means a lot of people will not be happy, because we have to come to terms that while there are pieces of this work that the city is very well suited to tackle, there are other parts that the people who are most proximate to their own challenges and the solutions that they know about, they're better positioned to solve them than government, than really anybody. And we need to empower those folks to be at the table. And also, in a public-private partnership, leadership and accountability are shared. The Poverty Action Fund being established and more capital being raised to match it would be overseen by a board made up of city appointees, community representatives, and other investors in the success of the project. Community will be front and center, and results will be important. And that's the last piece that I think is important for us to consider. If we're going to meet this moment, we have to have a commitment to accountability, to measurement, to scaling results that are as big as the challenges we're facing, and continuous learning. In addition to all the work that has gone on heretofore, United Way, in partnership with many investors and community organizations, had before it the largest single pro bono effort by Deloitte in North America, where they scanned every peer city and looked for the most effective investments in helping people increase their incomes and build greater stability. That, combined with interviews, as Charmaine mentioned, people from every sector of our community who want to dig in and roll up their sleeves and help our neighbors overcome their challenges. There was a real deep dive on what was important to them. And a theme that came up over and over again is many of our peer cities have a much greater ability to measure the impact and the return on an investment of a dollar that we put in the fight against poverty. That's why this public partnership and public-private partnership envisions the creation of a knowledge nerve center that sits at the center of this effort. It would not be an add-on, but a core component of the Poverty Action Fund. The Knowledge Nerve Center will not only give us real-time data on the impact of the investments, but will support community organizations who need to build their own measurement and evaluation capacity to prove what it is that they are doing to guide people toward greater economic empowerment and mobility and stability. Guided by this framework of accountability and measurement, we are really confident that progress can be achieved over a long term, but we will be able to see some shovel-ready projects that will bear some real fruit. So, Council, thank you for allowing me to share my sense of urgency, my passion for collaboration, and my commitment to measurement and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you both. Real quick, I want to acknowledge and I want to thank the administration who has worked along with us, Eva and Jim Engler and Marty Porter. We actually had a very productive call leading up to this. They are working. I just don't want people to think that there's no work that's being done on this initiative up until this point. But as always, the need for more resources to ensure that we get additional resources for the people always exists. And we believe having the ability to have the public-private partnership will exponentially change the incline as it relates to our ability to get to where we need to get. That earlier promise below 20%. It's going to be a heck of a challenge. I'm sure people have it on tape. And unlike Lindsey Graham, we're going to try and keep our word. Sorry for the politics. But the reality is that this is something, and the elephant in the room is what's going on literally right now in the city of Philadelphia. The challenges of last night and the traumatic experience. The sooner we get to a place, as Doc, I want to thank you, the sooner we get to a place where people have hope, real hope, not a promise by a politician, right? Not an application that never gets acted on it, not a training program that never has a light at the end of the tunnel that materializes into an actual family-sustaining job. Until we get to that point, we're going to continue to have these challenges. And I just think that, I know the heart and the soul of every member of council. We are there. We need to have the private sector had a conversation with the chamber. They've started to step to the plate. We're at our same-day pay initiative, and they're stepping to the plate with support. They're working with Councilwoman Parker. We had the announcement the other day on the commercial Carter initiative. They're stepping to the plate. That private sector is a key component in us being able to marshal enough resources to really move this needle. So I just want to thank you all so much. I want to recognize my good friend and colleague, a former member of the PCDC, prior economic development arm of the government, Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for all you're doing to step up to the plate in a meaningful way, along with my colleagues, to address the elephant in the room, which is poverty. And if you look at all of our problems, you can stem them back, whether it's crime, lack of education, poor health care choices, food choices, comes down to the issue of poverty. So I promise to help you get us out of here by 4 o'clock, and I shall. Real quick, if you had silver bullets in your guns, and and it got to be 10 words or less, and you were telling us what we should do. I heard a couple of them from you, Dr. Liebhardt. Give us 3 things that over the next year we should do to address the issue of poverty, succinctly.
That question is Dr. Liebhardt?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Councilman Jones, always a pleasure to see you. I mean, I think the big thing, there are a couple of things, right? We all know that poverty is attached to a living wage, right? And we all should be pushing and I'm a business owner in the city, and just out of morals and ethics, there is no way in heck that I can pay somebody under $15 an hour. There is just out of morals and maybe because of where I come from and the way my view is of the world and what people need as a life-sustaining wage, morals and ethics, I cannot. Although I could get them cheaper, I don't do that, right? Because there's just something into providing a place where a starting point for people. So we have to, and I know that's not something that could be done necessarily at a city level, but we need to be making sure that we're pushing on every legislator possible at the state level to make sure that is of the highest priority, right? There's no way and how or reason why Pennsylvania's minimum wage is lower than Delaware's and the surrounding other states, right? So I would start with that. I've said it before and I'll say it over and over again. Until the work sites in this city reflect the people of the city, we are in trouble, right? We cannot continue to outsource our labor and our effort to others who don't live in the city of Philadelphia and then expect the conditions of the city of Philadelphia to change for its people, right? We all know. And I was down here, had a business in Center City for the last 10 years, right in the Palm District. When COVID was quiet and town was quiet, the only thing that was moving was construction. And I would come downtown and be one of the few Black people downtown, right? Because none of the shops were open. They were boarded up like they are now, right? None of the shops were, but construction was still moving. And you ride in, big towers are going up, and minorities are not on these job sites. We know that's happening. This is not new. We're not, I'm not saying anything that's like a secret, right? So we have to be really, really clear and challenge those in positions to make a difference. If they say they want to make a difference, they say they really are about bringing down poverty, we need to challenge them around that aggressively, okay? And then the last thing I would say is that I'll now look at philanthropy. We have to do a better job, right, of not just funding BS or programs, as you said, with, training programs where no jobs exist, right? And 13 years ago when I first got into the philanthropy world and was on the side of kind of giving out dollars, I was looking at one of the most important issues in our city at the time, and that was reentry. That was before, everyone was talking about criminal justice reform, and Councilman Jones we were funded to look at reentry here in the city of Philadelphia, and this was the Liebhardt Foundation, trying to assist then Mayor Nutter and the Mayor's Office of Reentry and all the above, but there were no jobs at the other side. One of the reasons why I ended up buying a business, because I was so frustrated, and this was at the time Jerry Liebhardt was alive, and he would literally, and I was a young kid at the time, Jerry would call all of his peers and his friends, and you can probably imagine they would all show up. And they were all business leaders here in the city. We would have these roundtable discussions. He would invite them there to meet me so I could talk about the importance of reentry. We all know at the time, Philadelphia had over 200,000 ex-offenders, more felons per capita, right? More people coming home than anywhere per capita at the time, besides from Memphis, right? So it was a huge, huge problem in the city. So the thought was, once again, we have dollars and resources. We're going to fund training programs to get people jobs. We're going to talk to the business community about some of the crimes which make people felons, which is drug-related and all the above. Most times it was a drug-related offense and all, which are opportunity-related crimes, which are poverty-driven crimes or an addiction. And the sad part is, although a lot of people were well-meaning in the room, or at least said, I'm talking about the business community, said that they would support it, when the rubber met the road, they would say, well, we can't hire them for this reason or that reason. And I would challenge them. I'd say, listen, when I was in college, I used drugs too. And your kids probably use drugs too, right? And so we cannot say that drugs is the reason why we're not going to hire these people, right? And so I think we have to, as philanthropy, challenge ourselves, no longer fund programs. And this was the conversation. I'm surprised Bill actually asked me to speak, because me and Bill have had these direct conversations over and over and over again, right? And so, it is about being honest. It is about, showing some emotion, because what happens is we get what's happening in the city. We get the frustration. So everybody's frustrated right now. We are frustrated as people who want to see the best in this city, right? We know what's happening now is not right, but the people on the streets are frustrated too. Everybody's frustrated. The kids who are out there, who will be out there tonight, unfortunately, they're frustrated too. And so we're at this impasse, and as I said, and there is what we're missing here is Councilman Dom's network, which is a wonderful network of business leaders, but they need to be intentional too about addressing poverty in the city of Philadelphia and what they can do to come to the table. And I'll end it at that.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Doc. The aforementioned Councilman Dom. Recognize him, sir. Councilman.
Thank you, Council President. And Keith, I'll do whatever I can to try to help in this cause. I just want you to know that. So anything I can do to help, I'm happy to help, and I'll try to engage as many people as possible to help in this cause. And I want to thank Council President for having this committee of the whole meeting today, and also creating this Philadelphia Poverty Action Fund, which before the pandemic, we were at 25% poverty. And I don't even want to think about what the number is going to be after the pandemic. So really, this fund that you put together with Councilmember Kenona Sanchez is more important today than it was when you first put it together. It's actually crucial today. So just a few comments I wanted to make. I just wanted to make sure that whatever we decide to do, we have measuring programs like the Social Progress Index, that we can measure the investments we make to make sure we're investing the money the right way to really help people. And my main comment really today is that the economics and the ability to take people out of poverty is probably our number one issue in the city by far, and everything else is secondary. And whatever we can do to put the focus on that, we need to do. And again, Council President, thank you. I want to say, Councilmember Kenona Sanchez, thank you for your leadership on finding these issues. You did an amazing job. I was in the audience watching you, basically, and you were really terrific. You did a great job. And I just want to thank everyone who testified, all the chairs and everyone else, and all my colleagues. So thank you, and appreciate everyone's input. Thank you.
Tracy Hart.
Thank you. I heard his name. Do you have any other members of the committee who want to ask questions? Seems like we have somebody else on the call.
Jones, how are you? What's up,
Councilman Jones, can you put on mute?
Yeah, Councilman Jones, can you mute whatever's going on over there, sir? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, there being no further questions from members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify, I will ask that there is anyone else present in this hearing whose name we have failed to call and that wishes to offer testimony on any of the bills being considered today. There being none, checking on my electronics. I want to thank all the panels and witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinions. I now invite all panels and witnesses to please disconnect from the hearing before we go into our public meeting, and we will now pause the proceedings briefly as the multiple participants leave the hearing. I don't know why we're asking you to do that, but I'm just according to the script. All right. Desto? Okay. All right. This concludes the public hearing.
Council President.
Yeah. We okay?
Yes, we're okay.
Can we just proceed? Okay.
Yes, you can.
I'm just doing what I was told. This concludes the public hearing of the committee. We will now move to the public meeting and consider the action to be taken on the bills before the committee today. We will now convene. We'll ask for a roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. Mr. Christmas,
Yes, sir.
want to call the roll?
Council President Clark.
Here, present.
Council Lady Bass.
I am present. Thank you.
Council Lady Brooks.
Present.
Councilman Don.
Present.
Council Lady Godier.
Present.
Council Lady Gilmore Richardson.
Present.
Councilman Green. Councilman Green. Council Lady Gibbs.
Present.
Councilman Heenan.
Present.
Councilman Johnson.
Present.
Councilman Jones.
Present.
Councilman O'Neill.
Present.
Councilman O.
Present.
Council Lady Parker.
Present.
Council Lady Quinones Sanchez.
Present.
Councilman Squilla.
Present.
Councilman Thomas. Councilman Thomas.
Present.
We've established a quorum for the meeting, Council President.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker for a motion on bill number 200369.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that bill number 200369 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you. It's been moved and second. And properly second that text, the bill number 200369 be reported from this committee with favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at our next session of council. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Chair again recognizes Council Member Parker for a motion on bill number 200419.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that bill number 200419 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that bill number 200419 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of the bill at the next session of council. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, have it. Motion carries. Thank you very much. This concludes the business before the committee of the whole today. I want to thank you all so much and look forward to moving this extremely important initiative. There are a lot of people out there that are depending on what we do every day. So thank you all, and be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you.